Hey guys, welcome to Turbo 360. My name is Dan, and in this tutorial we're going to create a simple resume website, or a portfolio website, depending on how you want to use it. We're going to use Node Express for the server and some basic JavaScript jQuery on the front end, obviously HTML, CSS, and we're also going to deploy on Turbo, of course, and that's it. So this is a pretty good tutorial for beginner slash intermediate. If you're a complete beginner who has never coded before, this is going to move a little bit too fast for you. But if you have some basic experience with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Node and Express, then this is a good place to get started, or at least to continue your learning. I do assume that you have some basic Node Express experience and that you know how REST API works and things of that sort. So let's go ahead and make sure you have all the proper tools configured and everything is set on your machine. So open up your terminal and let's get started. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure you have the most up-to-date version of the CLI we're going to use, which is the Turbo CLI. So check your Turbo version number and make sure that your Turbo version is at least this 30.30 or higher. And if you don't have this, if you're behind or you don't have Turbo at all, it's simple. You just do sudo npm install -g turbo -CLI, and that will install the most up-to-date CLI as of whenever you're watching this video. So that should take care of that. We may use Gulp, so make sure you have Gulp installed globally on your machine as well. If you don't, it's simple. It's sudo npm install -g Gulp, and so make sure you have that. We may or may not use that, but at some point during this tutorial, it'll definitely come up. So I'm just not sure if we're going to use it in this first video. And for now, that should be good to go. So let's go ahead and cd to your work directory, and I'm going to start in my desktop. And the next thing you need to do is make sure you have an account on Turbo, of course, because we're going to use this for deployment. So head over to turbo360.co and sign up for an account. It is free, so don't worry about that. All of this will be free, so you don't have to worry about paying anything for the hosting. And this is where we're going to deploy our project for our staging environment. So make sure you have that, and we should be good to go. So head over to your project section, your sites on Turbo. I already have a few projects, experimental projects I've been working on, so yours is probably going to be empty if you're new to Turbo. And let's create our project. So let's call it a portfolio website. I think I spelled that right. Portfolio website. Go ahead and create your project. And this will create our staging environment on the Turbo ecosystem where we can deploy our website. Oh, and the last thing before I forget, the actual theme that you're looking at here that we're going to use for our website is a downloadable link on the web page of this tutorial or on the YouTube video, wherever you happen to be watching this. Just look in the description of the actual page, and you should see a link to download this theme. So you don't have to worry about that either. So we should be good to go. We have our project set up on Turbo. We have our CLI installed. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to use a theme on a feature on the Turbo CLI, which scaffolds projects according to certain categories. So it'll give us a project foundation, a Node Express project, which is already pre-optimized for certain categories, and these are called templates. So the template we're going to use is a resume template because we're essentially creating a resume website. And so Turbo comes with a handful of template options. Of course, one of them is resume, and that'll give us a series of configurations that are already set up for a standard resume website, like being able to post jobs in your job history, or references, because most resume websites will have like a references section or maybe a blog, something of that sort. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a Turbo, and this is going to be a template, and we're using the resume version of the template. So we go ahead and do that, and it's going to ask us for our site ID which is in your Turbo site. We grab the app ID, and then your API key, which is right here. So just copy and paste that into the terminal. And it will create the project according to the resume template. So we cd into the project. So if you look at your workspace, you should see the website project created. So we cd into that, and then we cd into it. And then if we open this up in our text editor, I'm using Atom, so whatever you prefer, so Sublime or Visual Studio is fine. You'll see the project already created, and we have a lot of configuration already set up. This is a Node Express project, so if you start out with the package.json, you will see our dependencies, as well as a couple dev dependencies and some basic scripts here. And this is all set to go. We normally wouldn't do much here. If you look at the app.js, this is where we import a lot of the routes and set our views directory, our static asset directory, which is going to be the public folder, and set some routes, some routes for request routing. That's done over here in the app.js, which is what you would normally expect in a Node Express project. The views directory contains our views, so we're using the Mustache templating engine. Again, very standard templating engine in a Node Express project. Sometimes you might see Hogan, or maybe a Pug or Jade, what used to be Jade. We have our routes folder, which is where the request routing is done. And so this is our index route, which is going to be the only route in this case. And our public directory where the static assets are maintained, which is pretty typical as well. But there's more stuff here that you wouldn't often find in a conventional project. Most notably is the models. So we have a models directory where there are some schemas already set up. For example, the job schema, a post. These are for blog posts, references, for a personal reference in your resume, or school for, let's say, the education section in your resume. So you can see right away that this template is already pre-configured for a standard resume website. It has a certain set of models and schemas that you would expect to find in most resumes, like a job history or a school for your education section, or a personal reference. Maybe a blog post if you want to include a blog or not. Certainly don't have to, but these options are already included if you do want them. And these controllers are included as well to handle the CRUD operations for each one of those resources. So this template provides you an API route that's already formatted for you to handle these models and resources in a very traditional REST API fashion. So what you can do is we can head into our terminal and test it out by installing the Npm modules first. Don't forget to do that because this is a Node Express project. So run the Npm install, which will run through the install section of the package.json. And then from there, we can test the local dev server and make sure everything works locally. And we can also see how the API route works by default. So, excuse me. So when this is done, this usually takes about a minute. We can test the local server. By running turbo dev server, so turbo dev server, and then head over to localhost 3000, and you'll see the standard turbo scaffold. But like I was explaining a minute ago, there are a handful of options of resources that can be served via typical REST API fashion right away. So for example, the post. There's also job and school and we can test a specific ID. Of course, none of these are populated because our project is empty, but all that is set up by virtue of the resume template that we have selected. So that comes right out of the box. It saves us a lot of time, and we don't have to set all that up. So in this video, the remainder of this video, we're going to implement the theme that I've decided to use for this project, which is right here. So again, you can download this theme by looking at the description if you're watching the YouTube video, or just look at the page of the tutorial itself on the website, and there's going to be a link where you can download this theme. So once you have that downloaded and unzipped, let's open it up in our text editor as well. And we are going to use the index HTML right here as our home page. So we want to copy the entire index HTML. So make sure you copy the entire thing, and then head over to your project and open up the views index mustache, and then remove all the contents from there, and then paste in the contents from the theme. So it should be about 730 lines. And then if you run the dev server, turbo dev server, our home page should look completely different now, hopefully, otherwise something went wrong. So let's go ahead and check that. So we head over to localhost 3000, and our home page is now completely different because we copied and pasted from the theme into our project. Of course, it doesn't look at all like the theme because we did not include any of the static assets. So the CSS and the JavaScript and the images, all that's not included. So let's go ahead and make that adjustment. So here is the theme, the original theme, and we have some static assets. We have CSS, IMG, and JavaScript, JS, and those need to be inside our project as well. So if you recall, if you head over to our source code, you'll see that in the app.js right here, the static directory is designated as the public folder. So inside the public folder is where all the CSS, images, and JS should go. So let's go ahead and make that adjustment. So we open up our public directory and open up the CSS folder, which right now is only Bootstrap. And if we open up the CSS folder from the project, the theme, excuse me, we can just take all these files and move them into here. And then, if we go back, there's also the images directory, but in the theme it's called IMG, so we can just move the entire folder over because they have different names anyway. If we open up the JS folder in our project, and then the JS folder in the theme, you'll see that we have these files need to be placed over into here. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to replace our jQuery with the one from the theme so there's no conflict of any kind. And that should resolve the static assets inside of our project. So if we go back to our terminal and run the dev server, we can reload localhost 3000 and we should see the theme, and we're good to go. Everything looks good. So that's great. So our theme was successfully imported, and everything looks the same on our project as it did when we looked at the original theme. So that's we're off to a good start. So one last thing I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to deploy the project to our staging environment just to make sure everything works as well on staging. We want to make sure things work on a staging environment as well as it does on the local environment so that we can code confidently on local. So let's go ahead and do that. So over here, you might have to do turbo login, and it will ask you for your email and password that you use to sign up on your turbo account. So go ahead and do that. You may not have to do this. It depends on whether or not you're already logged in. And then to deploy, all you do is turbo deploy, and that should take this project and throw it up on your staging environment, and then where we can test how it looks on staging to make sure it looks the same as it does on local. And that means everything is working on both environments, and we're ready to actually dig into the code and get started. So let's see how it looks in about a minute or two, and we can go from there. Alrighty, so when the deployment is done, it'll give you a link to the actual staging environment. So this is where my project is going to be located. So we can just copy and paste that into a browser, and hopefully it looks the same. And as we'll see in a few seconds. And here we go. So this looks the same. So here we have the same presentation on the staging as on the local. So a slight difference in the background color there, so I'll figure that out later, but for now everything looks good. So hopefully you got that working on your end as well. And what this means is now we can start coding on the project, and we can be confident that what we see on our local version is the same as on the staging environment, and we can start customizing this template for our own purposes. So I will start that in the next video. Hopefully you got all this working. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.